Knights in shining armor charging into battle on majestic steeds, saving damsels and living by a noble code. Sound familiar? That's the Hollywood version of medieval knights, but the real story is way grittier, wilder, and far more surprising than you've been told. Forget the fairy tales. The truth about knights is packed with brutal training, shocking scandals, and secrets that history books love to gloss over. We're diving deep into the hidden world of medieval knights, from their backbreaking lives to the myths we still believe today. By the end, you'll see knights in a whole new light, and maybe even wonder if you could have survived their world. What's the coolest knight story you've ever heard? Drop it in the comments and let's charge into this epic journey together. Picture a muddy field in 13th century England, the air thick with the clang of steel and the shouts of young boys, training to become knights. The path to knighthood didn't start with glory. It began with sweat, pain, and a whole lot of humility. Boys as young as 7 were sent away from home to serve as pages in a lord's castle, scrubbing floors, polishing armor, and learning to take orders. By their teens, they graduated to squires, basically knights in training, tasked with everything from cleaning weapons to hauling their master's gear into battle. The training was brutal. Think endless hours of sparring with heavy swords, falling off horses, and getting battered in mock fights. One wrong move, and you'd be nursing bruises for weeks. But it wasn't just physical. They had to master courtly manners, poetry, even dancing to impress the nobles. Why so tough? Because knighthood wasn't just a job, it was a way of life, and only the strongest survived. Imagine being a kid thrown into that grind. Could you handle it? Share your thoughts below. Now, let's talk armor, because that shining suit wasn't the romantic prop you see in movies. A full set of plate armor in the later Middle Ages weighed up to 60 pounds. Imagine running with a small child strapped to you. It was custom-made, insanely expensive, and took hours to put on with a squire's help. Early knights wore chainmail, which was lighter but still a nightmare to move in, especially when soaked with sweat or rain. Contrary to myth, knights weren't clunky robots. They trained to fight, climb, and even mount horses in that gear. But here's the kicker. Armor wasn't just for protection. It was a status symbol. A knight's suit screamed wealth and power, often decorated with intricate engravings or family crests. Poor knights? They made do with hand-me-downs or looted gear, risking their lives in rusty chainmail. The real danger? Heat stroke or exhaustion in battle, when that armor turned into an oven. What's the heaviest thing you've ever had to carry for hours? Drop it in the comments and let's see how it compares. Once a knight was battle-ready, the reality of combat was nothing like the gallant duels of legend. Medieval warfare was chaotic, bloody, and often terrifying. Knights were the tanks of their day, charging into battle on war horses trained to trample enemies. A lance strike could shatter bones, and if you fell, you were at the mercy of foot soldiers with daggers aimed at your armor's gaps. Tournaments, the so-called fun side of knighthood, were just as brutal. Knights died or were maimed in these friendly jousts. But battles weren't just about glory, they were business. Knights often fought for loot or ransom, capturing enemy nobles for hefty payouts. A good ransom could make you rich, but a bad day on the field? You'd be the one begging for mercy. And let's not forget the psychological toll. Knights faced constant pressure to prove their valor, knowing one mistake could end their career or life. Could you stay cool under that kind of pressure? What's the most intense challenge you've faced? Share it below. Let's shift to the code of chivalry, the supposed heart of knighthood. You've heard of it. Honor, loyalty, protecting the weak, right? Well, the truth is messier. Chivalry was more of an ideal than a rulebook, and plenty of knights ignored it. Some were straight-up thugs, looting villages or bullying peasants for profit. The code pushed knights to be devout Christians, defend the church, and respect women. But in practice, scandals were rampant. Knights seduced noblewomen extorted. Merchants, or turned mercenary when the money was good. Yet there were true believers, knights like William Marshall, who rose from obscurity to become England's greatest champion, staying loyal through wars and betrayals. Chivalry gave knights a framework to strive for, but human nature often got in the way. It's like trying to follow a perfect diet in a world full of pizza. Temptation was everywhere. What's a code you try to live by but sometimes slip up on? Hit the comments and let's talk. Now, let's talk about the knight's world beyond the battlefield. Castles weren't just fortresses, they were social hubs where knights had to shine. At feasts, they were expected to charm lords and ladies with wit, music, or tales of valor. A knight who couldn't flirt or tell a good story was as good as invisible. But life wasn't all banquets. Knights often managed estates, settled disputes, or trained younger squires, juggling roles as warriors, landlords, and diplomats. For many, loyalty to a lord meant constant travel, escorting nobles, guarding borders, or joining crusades halfway, across the world. The crusades, by the way, weren't the heroic quests we imagine. Knights faced disease, starvation, and brutal sieges, often returning broke or broken. Yet, the promise of spiritual glory or loot kept them going. Imagine leaving everything behind for a cause like that. Would you take the risk? What's the farthest you've traveled for something you believed in? Drop it below. Money was another harsh reality knights faced. Knighthood was expensive. Armor, horses, and weapons could bankrupt a family, and many knights relied on their lord's patronage or war spoils to stay afloat. A war horse alone cost as much as a modern luxury car, and you'd need several, since they died in battle or from exhaustion. Tournaments offered cash prizes, but losing meant debt or disgrace. Some knights turned to banditry or hired themselves out as mercenaries, blurring the line between hero and villain. Others inherited wealth or married rich heiresses to fund their lifestyle. Yes, knights could be gold diggers. The pressure to maintain status pushed many to desperate acts, from rigging tournaments to betraying allies. It's a reminder that even the noble knight was often just a guy trying to pay the bills. What's the most extravagant thing you've splurged on? Share it in the comments. Let's bust some myths about knights while we're at it. First, they weren't all noble-born. Many started as low-born squires who earned knighthood through skill or luck, like Roland, the legendary French knight who inspired epic poems. Second, knights didn't always fight for justice. Some were hired muscle, loyal to whoever paid best. And that damsel in distress trope? Mostly fiction. Women in the Middle Ages, especially noble women, were often power players, managing estates or influencing politics while knights were off fighting. The idea of knights as romantic heroes came later, from poets like Chrétien de Troyes, who spun tales of Lancelot and Guinevere. Real knights were more likely to be covered in mud than swooning over a lady. These myths shaped our view of the Middle Ages, but they hide the raw, messy truth. What's a historical myth you used to believe? Let me know below. The Knights. Life wasn't just about personal glory. It shaped history. Knights were the backbone of feudal armies, holding the line in battles like Agincourt or Crécy, where their charges turned the tide. They enforced the feudal system, keeping peasants in check and lords in power. But as gunpowder and professional armies emerged, knights became obsolete, their heavy armor no match for cannons. By the 15th century, knighthood was more ceremonial than practical, with knights focusing on courtly prestige over battlefield heroics. Yet their legacy lives on in our obsession with chivalry, from Renaissance fairs to Game of Thrones. Knights weren't perfect, but they embodied a world where strength, loyalty, and ambition collided. Could their ideals still inspire us today? What's one value from the past you think we need now? Share it in the comments. Stepping back, the life of a medieval knight was a brutal, thrilling, and often contradictory mix of duty, danger, and hustle. They weren't just warriors, they were symbols of a chaotic age, balancing honor with survival, faith with greed. From grueling training as kids to risking it all in battle, knights lived on the edge, their lives a far cry from the polished legends we know. They faced crushing costs, broke their own codes, and shaped Europe's future, all while dodging death in clunky armor. So, next time you see a knight in a movie, remember the real story. Grittier, messier, and way more human. Here's your challenge. Pick one knightly trait, courage, loyalty, or even their hustle, and try applying it this week. Maybe stand up for a friend or tackle a tough task head-on. Share how it goes in the comments. I'm rooting for you. If this dive into knightly secrets blew your mind, smash that like button, share with your history-loving pals, and subscribe for more untold tales from the Middle Ages. Our next video's gonna be just as epic. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. What's the most surprising knight fact you learned today? Drop it below, and let's keep the adventure going.